Bipartisan momentum pressured President Biden to finally ban Russian energy imports to the U.S. Let's bring in one of the lawmakers behind those efforts across the aisle, Republican Congresswoman from South Carolina, Nancy Mace. Good to have you back. Let me ask your reaction to the president's remarks today.
Well, certainly, we heard a few days ago he was going to look into it. Then they backtracked on it. And the pressure from Congress, the bipartisan pressure from Congress. And I want to thank Democrat Congressman Ro Khanna for doing this bill with me yesterday that we filed to ban Russian oil and gas imports. But that pressure from Congress, the pressure from the public and our allies abroad, put pressure on the White House to make that decision today to go forth and ban those imports, which is the equivalent of about 600,000 barrels of Russian oil and gas, every one of those barrels stained with Ukrainian blood.
So there's been some confusion and back and forth, too, about a different decision that the U.S. may make, and that has to deal with those Polish fighter jets that may make their way in transit through a U.S. base. Because of your background on many levels, you may be better to explain this to us. But Senator Ben Sasse said tonight President Biden should explain exactly why he vetoed these fighter jets for Ukraine. 2 days ago, the Secretary of State gave a green light to MiG transfers, but now the Department of Defense is raising red flags. What's going on? So what is going on, Congresswoman?
Yeah, it's hard to say because, again, like COVID-19, we're receiving mixed messages from the White House and different federal agencies, sort of getting our wires crossed. It is confusing. When you look at Poland, the number of jets, the MiG jets that they have, just under 30, why they would go to Ramstein, the base in Germany, it's a 1,000-mile trip, round trip, right? And yet Ukraine is 200 miles away. So why would you not just go directly into Ukraine with those planes? And so I don't know what kind of shell game is going on. Perhaps Poland wants some of our surplus F-16s. It's really hard to say. But when you look at the size of Ukraine, whether it's a dozen or 2 dozen MiG jets that go into Ukraine at some point or not, it's not going to be enough. Just a few days ago, I was reading about Russia's S-400 surface-to-air missile system, which is almost as good as our Patriot surface-to-air missile system. And, anything shy of, I think, an F-35 or F-22 is not going to make it with that system in Belarus like they say it is. And so it's kind of confusing because you would need hundreds of planes to have no-fly space over Ukraine or even Kyiv to see what's really going on. And so it's confusing to hear that kind of mixed messaging from the White House and the different agencies today.
So the U.S. and our allies, NATO, all across Europe, many steps have been taken to try to help Ukraine, whether it's funneling in weapons. We're trying to have these humanitarian corridors. There are sanctions that ratchet up every day on the oligarchs, on Putin himself, on interests of Russia. What more could we be doing in the U.S. to help out?
Well, certainly more on the humanitarian front. If you could freeze the airspace to have humanitarian aid come in, if you could truly have a ceasefire to get the civilians out. There have been civilian deaths. All of us have seen bombings and shellings of civilians and families and women and kids. That would be, I believe, the next phase of this thing. I think we need to be really careful about some of the rhetoric, some of the tweets, even by elected officials at this juncture. There's no telling what Putin is willing to do. He's willing to lose thousands of Russian troops for this thing. I think Ukraine has surprised him when he went into Georgia. They rolled over in 12 days. Crimea took about a month. To see the Ukrainians fight back, to see President Zelensky stand up to Putin in his face. But the next best step that I think we could do and our allies is to try to provide humanitarian aid for those that don't have food and water right now or shelter, and try to get as many civilians out of there as humanly possible as fast as we can.
And quickly, just to clarify, when you say freezing airspace over the humanitarian corridors, are you talking about something maybe like a limited no-fly zone just as to those corridors?
Correct. Just to those corridors, and to get humanitarian aid into those places where civilians are stuck and whose lives are in danger and livelihood.
Yeah, we have seen many promises, and yet when people try to evacuate, end up slaughtered in the process. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.